The United Kingdom is currently a mess. But this isn't about whether or not the Prime Minister held an illegal Christmas party breaking lockdown rules or the other scandals that Boris Johnson's facing. I'm talking about something much, much bigger. A set of problems so systemic that they go beyond party politics and could affect the future of the United Kingdom. One week supermarket shelves are empty, the next there are fights at gas stations as the fuel runs dry. Benefits are being cut, taxes are going up, wages have stagnated for more than a decade, and the COVID death toll is rising. On top of that, there's growing momentum for Scotland and maybe even Northern Ireland to leave this mess behind and break away from the UK. So why does it feel like the UK is falling apart? And what's caused this crisis? In October 2021, Britain's fuel crisis was so bad that the government sent the army out to make deliveries to gas stations. A shortage of truck drivers had led to long lines for fuel. At the same time, and for the same reason, some supermarket shelves started looking very empty. Meanwhile, farms were slaughtering their pigs because slaughterhouses had run out of workers. For months, employers had been warning about a labour shortage. But why was the UK suddenly short-staffed? To answer that, we've got to go back to 2016 and a vote that shocked the world.
The British people have spoken and the answer is, we're out.
On June 23, 2016, the UK narrowly voted for Brexit, to withdraw from the European Union. It was sold as a way to get independence, save millions of pounds, and gain full control of the UK's borders. But what Brexit meant in practice was leaving a political and economic union that the UK had helped build for the last 50 years. One of the EU's biggest achievements was that every citizen had the freedom to travel, live and work wherever they wanted. So that meant a Brit could decide to move to sunny Spain without needing permission from anyone, and a Romanian could get a job in Britain just as easily. Brexit ended that relationship and exposed just how much the UK had relied on foreign workers for the low-paid, essential work that had kept the country going. Alexandra Bullat is from an organisation that speaks up on behalf of EU citizens in the UK.
If we look at driver shortages, if we look at social care, if we look at agriculture, for instance, those are all sectors where quite historically there was a high percentage of migrant workers, especially people from the European Union, especially in the jobs that are lower paid.
Before the UK left the EU, around 25% of workers from 10 Eastern European EU states worked in so-called low-skilled jobs, compared to just 9% of UK-born workers. But that's all changed, and there's been an exodus of EU workers.
Prices are going up, the quality of living is decreasing for many workers, and I think some people, at least people that I spoke to, did realize they could have in some other countries in the EU or outside the EU a better quality of life and perhaps less of a worry about their future status in terms of immigration.
The post-Brexit immigration rules mean that when a Polish truck driver leaves the UK, it's much harder to replace them with a new Polish truck driver. Brexit campaigners hoped that British workers would come forward to fill the gaps, but that hasn't happened in large enough numbers. And COVID added to the problem, delaying 40,000 truck driving tests, according to the government. For the EU workers that the UK depended on, Brexit might have been the final straw. Because even before Brexit, UK governments had played to right-wing xenophobia for more than a decade. In 2007, Labour Prime Minister Gordon Brown promised British jobs for British workers. 5 years later, the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition government launched a policy called the hostile environment, which was a tactic to encourage immigrants to leave by making life difficult for them. And the anti-foreigner message was one of the key tactics of Brexit campaigners, sometimes dog-whistly, sometimes openly racist. European embassies in London registered 60 suspected hate crimes in the 3 months after the Brexit vote, almost all targeting Eastern Europeans. So look, the hostile environment policy, Brexit and hate crimes, all of these things helped push key workers out of Britain and push Britain into a crisis.
in terms of the psychological impact that Brexit did make quite a lot, I would say, EU migrants not feel as welcome as they felt before. Yes, I think there is a concern about hate crimes, but also broader racism and xenophobia in society.
And Alexandra says it's only now that there are shortages that the UK is starting to realise the value of the workers it's lost.
Migrants are not just commodities and taxpayers, they're part of our communities, their families and neighbours, and we need to rethink this whole discourse around what kind of work we value.
While migrants suffered from xenophobic narratives and the government's hostile policies, they weren't the only group to be outcast. There was a sustained political and media attack on people living in poverty, a group that makes up about 20% of the UK population. The most vulnerable were labelled benefit scroungers. In other words, people who live off government handouts and don't want to work. The reality, though, is a little different. Of those eligible for an unemployment check, less than a third of them claim it. But the benefit scroungers narrative set the stage for a cut in state benefits.
1 in 7 children are going hungry and 1 in 10 adults are going hungry as well. Now, the social security payments for those on low incomes is called universal credit. And this government is now cutting universal credit by £1,000. This government to now cut those payments further to lead to more hungry children is absolutely disgraceful.
In 2021, UK energy prices rose by 12%. For 3 million people, many of whom depend on state benefits, that may mean having to choose between heating their homes or buying food.
There definitely is a cost of living crisis in the UK. So look, we're seeing bills are rising. We're expecting inflation to hit 5% by next spring. A typical family of 4 could expect their bills to rise by about £1,700. For those on low incomes in particular, they're facing what is going to be a cold, dark and hungry winter ahead.
But don't think that this is all because of Brexit. This crisis has been building for more than a decade. When the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition government took power from the Labour Party in 2010, it said austerity was the only way to recover from the 2008 financial crisis. Even before the pandemic, austerity left the UK economy $130 billion smaller than it would have been without it. And average wages have stayed pretty much flat since 2008. But COVID set household incomes back even further. It's thought they won't get back to pre-pandemic levels until at least 2023.
It's difficult to quantify the exact impact that Brexit is having. It's making things far more expensive. It's making it more difficult to trade across borders. Shipping costs are 25% more to this country. That gives you a good idea of how much more expensive Brexit is making things in this country. It's about a quarter more than we would expect if we were still inside the European Union.
And while benefits are being cut and prices are rising, taxes on working people are going up.
This government wanted to raise the money. It could have done so from the wealthiest people, and instead chose to raise taxes on working people. Increasingly what we're seeing in this country is how well you do isn't really about how hard you work, but it's how much you own, or if you're young, it's how rich your parents are.
But Brexit could have a more permanent impact on the UK, one that would be irreversible. The breakup of the United Kingdom. A majority in Scotland and Northern Ireland voted to stay in the EU, but they were forced to leave because England and Wales, which have the majority of the UK's population, voted to leave.
It didn't really matter at the end of the day what people in Scotland voted for. It sort of undermined Scotland's status as a nation within the United Kingdom.
Add to that the shortages in stores and the cost of living going up, and is it any wonder that some in Scotland and Northern Ireland are talking about leaving the United Kingdom and trying to rejoin the EU? On paper, that would seem to save the UK a lot of money. Northern Ireland and Scotland are 2 of the 9 UK regions that ran a fiscal deficit in 2019. But if Scotland and Northern Ireland break away, it would mean losing more than 10% of the UK's population and half of the 4 constituent nations of the United Kingdom. The Scottish National Party, which was founded to fight for independence from the UK, lost an independence referendum in 2014, but now it's pushing for a new one. Of the 650 seats in the House of Commons, 59 of them represent Scottish constituencies, and the SNP holds more than 75% of those Scottish seats. And that's not just because of the independence movement, but also because of its social democratic policies. The SNP's growth has been at the expense of both the Conservative and Labour parties in Scotland, parties which both fought loudly against independence in 2014. And if Scotland leaves, where does that leave Northern Ireland, another part of the UK where there's open talk of breaking away? Until a century ago, the whole of Ireland was part of the UK. An independence movement changed that, and on December 6, 1921, the Irish Free State was declared. But the 6 counties of Northern Ireland remained part of the UK. What followed were decades of fighting in Northern Ireland between Republicans who wanted to reunify Ireland and Unionists who wanted to remain part of the UK. It wasn't until 1998 that a peace deal finally ended most of the fighting. During the conflict, known as the Troubles, the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland was heavily fortified, with barbed wire, fences and military checkpoints. Those physical barriers were a target for armed groups that wanted a united Ireland. Customs checks between Northern Ireland and the Republic continued until 1993, when the European single market was created. That removed most internal border checks on goods within what would become known as the European Union. The UK's only land border with the EU is in Northern Ireland, so Brexit risks rebuilding those fences that the European single market and then the peace deal tore down, and reigniting a conflict that has been dormant for more than 20 years. So if the UK's handling of Brexit puts communities in Northern Ireland at risk, could they decide they're safer as part of the Republic of Ireland?
Being part of the European Union meant that it was easy for people in Northern Ireland to be British or to be Irish, or to be Irish in a particular unionist type of way. And Brexit has made those things much more difficult to reconcile.
And COVID has also made differences between England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland very visible. Each of the 4 nations in the UK handles its own health policy, and they've sometimes taken different paths. So yes, the Prime Minister is dealing with a number of political crises right now, and he's receiving a lot of criticism from his own party and the public. But the crisis that the UK is going through is so much bigger, and it's one that we may be dealing with the fallout from for many years to come.